When my husband sent me a text saying he was leaving me for a college student and had already stolen our money, he thought he was destroying me. Little did he know I had been 3 steps ahead all along. By the time he realized his mistake, it was far too late to undo the damage he had done to himself. The notification chimed on my phone during the most ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I was standing in front of 24 eager faces at the downtown community center, demonstrating the perfect way to seal empanadas. The golden dough crinkled between my fingers as I explained the traditional technique my grandmother had taught me decades ago. But when I glanced at my phone, the world seemed to pause. Done with this joke of a marriage, Elena. Amber and I are heading to Miami. She's everything you'll never be, young, fun, and actually appreciates me. Oh, and I cleaned out our account this morning. Don't bother trying to stop us. My student Mrs. Peterson, a retired librarian with sharp eyes, noticed my momentary stillness. Is everything all right, dear? I slipped the phone back into my apron pocket and continued folding the empanada with steady hands. Everything's perfect. Now watch carefully, this is where most people make their mistake. My voice remained calm, professional even, but inside I was already calculating my next dozen moves. You see, I'm Elena Rodriguez, 43 years old, and I've been watching my husband David's midlife crisis unfold like a predictable movie for the past 4 months. The expensive cologne that suddenly appeared on our bathroom counter. The gym membership he'd never used before. The way he started wearing tight shirts and talking about living authentically, while complaining that our 16-year marriage felt stagnant. 6 weeks ago, I'd found restaurant receipts in his jacket pocket, expensive dinners for 2, while I was working late at my catering business. That same day, I opened a private account at Community First Bank. When David suggested we streamline our finances by consolidating everything into one joint account, I smiled sweetly and agreed. What he didn't realize was that for weeks, I'd been redirecting my income from the catering company, my weekend farmer's market booth, and my great-aunt's inheritance into that secret account. As I packed up my teaching supplies that afternoon, my phone buzzed again. Don't even think about begging me to come back. This has been planned for months. Amber makes me feel alive again, something you never could. I screenshot every message and filed them in a folder I titled Evidence. The joint account David had drained? It contained exactly what I'd been depositing weekly to keep him from getting suspicious, roughly $1,800. The real money, the profits from my successful catering business that had grown from a side hustle to a 6-figure operation, the income from my cooking classes, the vendor fees from my food truck ventures, all safely tucked away in my name only. My first call went to my sister Maria. He actually went through with it, I said, starting my car in the community center parking lot. Sent the breakup text and bragged about stealing money. Maria had been warning me about David's wandering eye since last Christmas when she caught him staring at the young server at our family dinner. What's your next move, Hermana? I pulled out of the parking space with a smile spreading across my face. Time to make some calls. My attorney Janet Morrison answered on the second ring. We'd been preparing for this moment since I discovered Amber's handwritten notes tucked inside David's toolbox 6 weeks earlier. Time to file? She asked immediately. He made it easy for us, I replied, forwarding David's text messages. Look at this, he's confessing to planning this betrayal for months and admitting to stealing marital assets, all in writing. Janet's laughter was sharp and satisfied. Elena, your husband just handed us the perfect divorce case. Written evidence of premeditation, confession to financial theft and abandonment. Combined with your business record showing clear asset separation, this is almost too easy. While David probably imagined me sobbing into a pillow, I was actually sitting in my favorite corner booth at Rosita's Cafe, reviewing paperwork I prepared weeks in advance. The deed to our house, inherited from my parents, entitled solely in my name. The registration for my food truck, my business license for Elena's Authentic Catering, the contracts for my cooking classes at 3 different community centers, every document bearing only my signature. My phone continued buzzing throughout the evening. I know you're hurt, but you'll understand someday. You've been holding me back for years, and Amber sees my potential. Each message was another piece of rope for David to hang himself with. I forwarded everything to Janet and kept my responses brief and emotionless. I understand. Take care. That night, I sat in my kitchen, our kitchen, though soon to be mine alone, and made a list. David thought he was so clever, but he'd never paid attention to the details that mattered. Like how I'd maintained separate business accounts from day one. How I'd used insurance money after the kitchen fire 2 years ago to renovate, all in my name. How I'd built my catering business from scratch while he complained about the long hours and called it my cute little hobby. Around 9 o'clock, the doorbell rang. David's older brother Carlos stood on my porch, looking embarrassed and uncomfortable. "Elena, I'm so sorry." David called the whole family, said you two had grown apart naturally. But the way he's talking about this Amber girl. Carlos shook his head. Something feels wrong about this whole situation. He's a grown man making his choices, I replied, inviting Carlos inside for coffee. We'd always had a good relationship. Did he mention emptying our bank account too? Carlos's face went pale. He did what? Elena, that's not right. I showed him David's messages, watching his expression grow more disgusted with each line. 16 years of marriage, and this is how he chooses to end it, Carlos muttered. My brother has lost his damn mind. And this Amber girl, I met her at his office Christmas party. She kept asking questions about David's salary, whether he owned the house, what kind of car he drove. After Carlos left, I called my credit card company. This is Elena Rodriguez. I need to report unauthorized charges and remove my husband as an authorized user. The customer service representative found the charges immediately: 2 first-class tickets to Miami, a luxury hotel booking, expensive restaurant reservations. All charged after David had already announced he was leaving me. Based on these text messages you've provided, Mrs. Rodriguez, we'll reverse all charges immediately and cancel his access. We take fraud very seriously. I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. David and Amber would arrive at the airport tomorrow only to discover their romantic getaway had been canceled. My business partner Luis called that night with interesting news. Elena, there are strange rumors circulating at the Restaurant Association meeting tonight. Something about David claiming partial ownership of our catering business. I nearly choked on my tea laughing. Luis, David has never worked a single day in the food service industry. He's never even helped me load equipment into the truck. That's what I figured, Luis replied. But he's been telling people he was your silent partner, that he provided the startup capital for your business. Another lie to add to Janet's growing file. I'd started Elena's Authentic Catering with my own savings, a small business loan in my name only, and equipment I'd purchased myself. David had actually criticized the venture, saying it would interfere with my duties as his wife. Wednesday morning brought a flood of increasingly frantic messages from David. What did you do? Our flight was canceled. The hotel won't honor our reservation. I know you're behind this, Elena. Answer me right now. I prepared a leisurely breakfast, fed my cat Mimi, and got ready for my Wednesday morning cooking class, my favorite group of senior citizens learning traditional Latin American recipes. Mrs. Williams, 78 years old and sharper than most people half her age, noticed my improved mood immediately. You look different today, dear. Lighter somehow. I smiled while adding saffron to the rice. Just making some positive changes in my life, Mrs. Williams. Around noon, David's sister Christina called. Elena, what's this about divorce papers? David is ranting about you being vindictive and destroying his chance at happiness. I put her on speaker while I prepped ingredients for an afternoon catering job. Christina, did your brother mention the text where he bragged about stealing our money? Long pause. He actually took money from your account? I read her David's messages word for word, including the part where he laughed about draining our account and called me too old to understand real love. Oh my God, Elena. I had no idea. He told everyone you'd grown cold and distant, that the marriage had ended naturally. Christina's voice cracked. These messages. This isn't the brother I thought I knew. By mid-afternoon, David's mother Rosa called. She'd always been tough but fair with all her children. Elena Mija, Christina told me everything. Those horrible text messages. I'm ashamed of my son. Stealing money, abandoning his wife for some child, ending a marriage through his phone. What can I do to help? Just don't enable him, Rosa. David needs to face consequences for his choices for once. David had always been the golden child who got rescued from every bad decision. His parents had covered his car payments, credit card debts, even his failed attempt at starting a landscaping business that lasted 3 months. That evening brought my favorite phone call. Janet, my attorney, called with updates. Elena, the emergency hearing is scheduled for Monday. Given David's written confessions and the credit card fraud, we're looking at what I like to call a slam dunk case. Plus, this Amber girl has been documenting their entire disaster on social media. She's complaining about being stuck in some cheap motel outside Miami. I actually felt sorry for Amber. At 21, she probably thought she was landing a successful older man. Instead, she got David, a 45-year-old with more debt than assets, living off credit cards and his wife's hard work. My phone buzzed with another message from David. You think you're so smart, Elena, but I know about your little food business. Half of everything you've built belongs to me legally. I forwarded it to Janet immediately. Poor David. He'd never paid attention to my paperwork, never realized I'd built everything without his help or money. The catering business, the food truck, the cooking classes, even my weekend farmer's market stall, I'd started them all while he complained about my obsession with work and asked when I'd have time to focus on our marriage again. Thursday morning brought a surprise from my cooking class students. Mrs. Williams presented me with a card signed by everyone. We heard about your troubles, but we want you to know you're the strongest woman we've ever met. I got teary reading their messages of support. These people had become my chosen family over the years, cheering my successes and offering comfort during difficult times. The funny thing about David's great escape plan was that he'd never bothered researching Florida divorce laws or Amber's actual financial situation. According to Carlos, Amber worked part-time at a bubble tea shop and shared a studio apartment with 3 roommates. Not exactly the luxurious lifestyle David had imagined. My sister Maria stopped by Thursday evening with wine and Thai takeout. So tomorrow's the big day. I nodded, reviewing my documentation one final time. 16 years of marriage reduced to a stack of papers, text messages, and financial records. You know what's crazy, Maria? If David had just talked to me, we might have worked things out. Marriage counseling, maybe a trial separation. But he chose the cruelest possible path. Maria raised her glass. His loss, Hermana. You're about to be free to become who you really are. The courthouse Monday morning felt like a stage set for David's final performance. He arrived dressed like a man half his age, designer jeans, expensive sneakers, and a leather jacket that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. Amber waited outside looking uncomfortable in an outfit clearly borrowed from someone else's closet. My attorney Janet was all business. Remember, Elena, stay calm and let the evidence speak for itself. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, reviewed our materials with raised eyebrows. David's hastily hired lawyer kept shuffling papers nervously. Your Honor, Janet began. Mr. Rodriguez admitted via text message to deliberately draining marital assets and using joint credit cards to fund a vacation with his girlfriend. We have documented evidence of his deception and financial misconduct. David's lawyer attempted a desperate defense. Your Honor, my client simply wanted to end a failing marriage cleanly. The judge looked unimpressed. By committing what appears to be theft and credit card fraud? I watched David's face as reality finally hit him. He'd expected this to be simple: divorce the boring wife, take half her assets, start fresh with his young girlfriend. Instead, he was facing a judge who clearly had no patience for men who abandoned their families via text message. Mr. Rodriguez, the judge addressed David directly. You sent messages bragging about draining your joint account and stealing money for a vacation. Do you deny sending these messages? David shifted uncomfortably. I was just trying to make a clean break, Your Honor. The judge's expression grew colder. By committing crimes, Mr. Rodriguez? The hearing lasted 3 hours, but the outcome was clear from the beginning. David's text messages had created a perfect paper trail of premeditation. His admission of months of planning destroyed any claim of impulsive decision-making. The fraudulent credit card charges sealed his fate. The court finds clear evidence of financial misconduct, the judge announced. All marital assets are frozen pending final dissolution. Mr. Rodriguez must return stolen funds within 72 hours or face criminal charges. David's face went white. But Your Honor, that money is gone. We spent it on. Then I suggest you find a way to replace it, the judge cut him off. The court takes a very dim view of spouses who abandon their families via text message while committing financial fraud. Outside the courthouse, I could hear Amber arguing with David about their failed Miami plans. Their voices carried across the parking lot, her confused and angry, him defensive and panicked. Walking to my car, I felt a moment of perfect clarity. This wasn't about winning or revenge. It was about protecting myself from someone who had revealed his true character when tested. The following weeks brought a parade of David's desperate attempts to rewrite history. He claimed he'd helped start my catering business. The loan documents proved otherwise. He said he'd been my business partner. State registration records showed my sole ownership. He even tried claiming the cooking classes were his idea. My teaching certification and venue contracts told a different story. Janet called with updates that ranged from amusing to pathetic. He's now claiming you were emotionally abusive, and that leaving was his only option for survival. His lawyer asked me to consider that defense. We both laughed. What did you tell him? I offered to share your student's character references and the text messages where he admits to planning this betrayal for months, while calling you too old to understand love. David's attempts to paint himself as the victim crumbled when faced with his own written confessions of deception and theft. The divorce proceedings revealed just how little David had actually contributed to our life together. While I'd been building businesses and planning for our future, he'd been accumulating credit card debt on expensive gadgets and clothes. While I'd been working 60-hour weeks, he'd been planning his escape with a college student. Maria visited regularly during this time, helping me process the end of my marriage. Are you sad it's over? She asked one evening. I considered the question seriously. I'm sad about the wasted time. Sad about who I thought he was, but relieved about who I actually am. My cooking classes became a form of therapy. Students shared their own stories of betrayal and recovery. Mrs. Williams, whose husband had left her after 38 years for his secretary, became my unofficial mentor. The first year after betrayal is the hardest, she told me while we prepared tres leches cake. But then you realize you're not half of something broken anymore. You're complete all by yourself. David's family gradually shifted their loyalty to me. His brother Carlos brought me divorce papers David had tried to hide. His sister Christina shared worried messages about David's increasingly erratic behavior. Even his parents, Rosa and Miguel, called regularly to check on my well-being. We raised him to be better than this, Rosa said during one particularly long conversation. But somewhere David started believing he deserved more than what he had: a more exciting wife, more money, more attention. He forgot how to be grateful. Through mutual friends, I heard about David and Amber's relationship imploding spectacularly. Living in a cramped studio apartment with multiple roommates wasn't the romantic adventure either had envisioned. Amber's social media posts went from couple photos to cryptic quotes about toxic relationships and learning from mistakes. My business partner Luis brought me the most amusing update. Elena, you won't believe this. David actually came by the food truck yesterday, asking if we needed an investor now that you were single. Luis couldn't stop laughing. I told him the business was thriving, and we were actually opening a second location next month. His face was priceless. That night, I sat in my kitchen, the heart of both my home and my business empire, planning menus for next month's expanded cooking class schedule. David had always complained about the smell of spices and the mess of recipe testing. Now I could cook whatever I wanted whenever inspiration struck. The final divorce hearing painted a crystal-clear picture of our 16-year marriage. I kept the house I'd inherited from my parents, the businesses I'd built from scratch, and the savings I'd protected. David got his personal belongings, his car with 4 years of payments remaining, and his accumulated debt. His lawyer made one final desperate attempt. "Your Honor, my client sacrificed career opportunities to support his wife's business ventures." Janet stood immediately. Mrs. Rodriguez's business records show she worked 60-hour weeks while maintaining the household and supporting Mr. Rodriguez through multiple job changes and failed business attempts. If anything, she supported him. The judge had clearly lost patience with David's excuses. "Mr. Rodriguez, the evidence shows you contributed very little to this marital partnership, while your wife built multiple successful businesses. Your admitted plan to drain joint accounts demonstrates a fundamental lack of respect for your spouse." David's final settlement reflected his choices perfectly. He walked away with essentially nothing while I retained everything I'd worked to build. "This is completely unfair," David protested as we left the courthouse. 16 years of marriage should count for something. His mother Rosa, who had come to support me rather than him, shook her head sadly. "Those 16 years do count, David. They show exactly who you really are." Amber was notably absent from this final hearing. Office gossip suggested she'd started dating someone her own age and returned to college. David faced the consequences of his choices alone, 45 years old, living in a cheap apartment, working a job that barely covered his expenses. 8 months after David's text message ended our marriage, I hosted the grand opening of my second catering location. The event drew hundreds of people, former students, local business owners, friends who'd supported me through the divorce, and media covering what they called my Phoenix Rising story. My sister Maria worked the crowd, proudly telling everyone about my transformation. She took her husband's worst betrayal and turned it into her greatest opportunity, she told a local news reporter. I smiled watching my team serve food to happy customers. David drove by during the celebration. I saw his old car slow down as he stared at the crowd, the news cameras, the banner celebrating my expansion. For a moment our eyes met through his window. I felt nothing but peace. His betrayal had freed me to become who I was always meant to be. The business grew beyond my wildest dreams. I hired 12 employees, opened a small restaurant, and started offering franchise opportunities to other aspiring food entrepreneurs. What David had dismissed as my cute cooking hobby became a thriving business empire worth more than he'd ever earn. Amber reached out once, almost a year after everything ended. She'd heard about my success and wanted to apologize. "I thought I was saving him from an unhappy marriage," she admitted over coffee. "I believed everything he told me about you being cold and controlling." "He was looking for someone to blame for his own unhappiness," I explained gently. "It wasn't really about you or me. It was about him not knowing how to appreciate what he already had." Amber nodded, looking much older than her 22 years. "I learned that lesson the hard way. 2 years after the divorce, I was invited to speak at a women's entrepreneurship conference. My topic wasn't about marriage or divorce, it was about building a business while protecting your assets and maintaining financial independence. During the Q&A, a young woman asked about keeping business and personal finances separate. "My boyfriend says that shows I don't trust him," she said uncertainly. I smiled, remembering David's similar complaints when I first started my catering business. "Protection isn't about trust," I replied. "It's about being smart. Always trust your instincts and prepare for any possibility." My cooking classes had evolved into a local institution. Students came not just to learn recipes, but to hear stories of resilience and recovery. Mrs. Williams, now 79, had become my co-instructor. "Elena doesn't just teach cooking," she'd tell new students. "She teaches people how to nourish their souls." David's attempts to rebuild his life were far less successful. According to his brother Carlos, he struggled with dating apps, finding few women interested in a middle-aged man with limited resources and a reputation for abandoning his wife. His social media posts about feeling young again seemed increasingly desperate. He tried starting his own catering business to compete with mine, but it failed within 4 months due to poor planning and insufficient funding. Carlos told me David had asked his parents for money, but Rosa and Miguel had learned their lesson about enabling his poor decisions. The final update came from an unexpected source. Rosa, David's mother, had become a regular customer at my restaurant. "He asked me to talk to you," she said one day over lunch. "Wants to know if you'd consider reconciliation." I set down my fork and looked at this woman who'd raised the man who tried to destroy me. "Rosa, what do you think I should do?" She was quiet for a long moment, then shook her head. "Elena, my son showed you exactly who he is when things got difficult. People don't change unless they truly want to. And David still thinks he's the victim in this story." That conversation confirmed what I already knew. David's text message hadn't just ended our marriage, it had revealed the truth about his character. Someone who could plan betrayal for months, steal shared money, and abandon their spouse via text wasn't someone who'd learned from their mistakes. 3 years after that cruel message, I received an invitation to my nephew's wedding, David's nephew too, from his brother Carlos's family. I almost declined, but Carlos personally asked me to be there. "You're still family to us," he said. "David's actions don't change that." At the wedding reception, I sat with Carlos's family, laughing and celebrating new love. Across the room, David sat alone at a corner table. He'd gained weight, lost more hair, and looked older than his years. When our eyes met, he raised his glass slightly in some kind of acknowledgement. Later, as I was leaving, he approached me in the parking lot. "Elena," he said quietly, I wanted to tell you." He struggled for words, and I waited patiently. Finally, "I was wrong about everything. I threw away the best thing in my life." I looked at this man who'd shared 16 years of my life, who'd promised to love and honor me, who'd ended our marriage with a laughing text message about stealing our money. "David," I said gently, "I hope you find happiness. I really do. Just not with me." Driving home that night, I thought about the journey from that devastating text message to this moment of complete closure. David's betrayal had been the catalyst for discovering my own strength. His attempt to diminish me had revealed just how capable I really was. My restaurant empire had grown to include 4 food trucks, 3 sit-down locations, and a catering company that served events throughout 3 states. The cooking classes had expanded into a culinary institute, where I taught other women to start their own food businesses. I'd written a cookbook that became a regional bestseller and was being courted by publishers for a national release. None of this would have happened if David hadn't sent that cruel message. His betrayal had forced me to stop playing small, stop dimming my light to make someone else comfortable. In trying to destroy me, he'd actually set me free. My sister Maria often joked that David had done me the biggest favor of his life by leaving. "Think about it," she'd say. "You could still be married to someone who didn't appreciate you, supporting his dreams while he dismissed yours." She was absolutely right. David's selfishness had been my liberation. The young women who worked in my restaurants often asked about my divorce, inspired by my story of rebuilding after betrayal. The hardest part, I'd tell them, wasn't the divorce itself. It was realizing I'd spent years making myself smaller to accommodate someone who never valued my contributions. I kept David's original text message framed in my office not as a reminder of pain, but as proof of how far I'd traveled. Below it hung a photo from my latest business expansion, surrounded by employees who'd become like family. The contrast told the entire story. 5 years after David's text message, I was featured on the cover of Southwest Business Magazine as Entrepreneur of the Year. The article focused on my journey from cooking instructor to restaurant empire builder, highlighting my commitment to hiring and training other women in the food industry. The interviewer asked about my divorce only briefly. "That experience taught me the importance of protecting what you build," I explained. "Not because you don't trust people, but because you owe it to yourself to be prepared for anything." The article mentioned David only as her former spouse, a footnote in my success story. My nephew's wife, inspired by my business model, had started her own bakery using principles I'd taught her about financial independence and gradual growth. Watching her success reminded me that David's betrayal hadn't just changed my life, it had created ripples that helped other women too. The Culinary Institute I'd opened had trained over 300 students in its first 3 years. Many had gone on to start their own food businesses, creating a network of women entrepreneurs who supported each other's success. Mrs. Williams, now 81, still taught classes on traditional techniques and life wisdom. During our 5th anniversary celebration, Mrs. Williams pulled me aside. "You know what I love most about this place? It's not just about food. You've created a space where people learn they're capable of more than they imagined." Her words captured exactly what I'd hoped to build: not just a business, but a community. Rosa, David's mother, had become one of my most loyal customers and an unofficial ambassador for the restaurant. She brought friends, hosted family celebrations, and always spoke proudly of what Elena accomplished. Her support meant more than she knew, representing a bridge between my past and present. The final chapter of my story with David came 6 years after his devastating text. His brother Carlos called with news. "David had a heart attack. He's in the hospital and asking for you." I told him I'd call, but I understand if you don't want to see him. I sat with that request for several hours. Part of me felt obligated by our shared history, 16 years of marriage that had meant something once. But the larger part of me recognized that chapter had closed long ago. David and I were different people now, shaped by the choices we'd made after his betrayal. Instead of visiting, I sent flowers with a simple card. "Wishing you a full recovery, Elena." Carlos later told me David had cried when he read it, understanding that my kindness came from a place of peace rather than any desire to reconnect. That gesture felt like the final period at the end of our story. I'd moved from devastation to success, from betrayal to wisdom, from anger to peace. David's cruel text had been intended to break me, but it had actually been the beginning of my truest life. My business empire continued expanding. I'd been approached by investors interested in taking the brand national, but I preferred the personal connection of regional growth. Each new location allowed me to hire more women, teach more skills, and create more opportunities for independence. The cooking classes had evolved into something magical: part culinary school, part therapy session, part business incubator. Students came to learn recipes but left with confidence, skills, and often friendships that lasted long after graduation. Many had become successful entrepreneurs themselves. 7 years after David's text message, I was invited to speak at the same community center where I'd first read his cruel words. The kitchen where I'd taught empanada making that day now hosted my advanced entrepreneurship classes for women starting food businesses. Looking out at the audience of aspiring entrepreneurs, I shared the truth David had never understood. Success isn't about having someone support your dreams. It's about believing in yourself enough to make them happen, regardless of who else believes in you. A young woman in the front row raised her hand. "What if your family thinks you're being too ambitious?" I smiled, remembering David's constant complaints about my obsession with work. "Then you're probably on the right track." The question and answer session revealed how many women struggled with the same issues I'd faced: partners who minimized their ambitions, families who prioritized others' comfort over their success, internal voices that whispered they weren't capable of more. "The most important lesson I learned wasn't about business or money," I told them. "It was about trusting my own judgment. When someone shows you who they are through their actions, believe them the first time." After the presentation, several women approached with their own stories of betrayal and recovery. Some were still in the devastating early stages, others years into rebuilding. All of them were stronger than they realized, just as I'd been on that day when David's message arrived. That evening, I walked through my flagship restaurant during dinner service. The kitchen hummed with efficient activity, servers moved gracefully between tables, and customers enjoyed meals prepared with love and skill. This world I'd built was exactly what David had dismissed as my cute little hobby. My assistant manager Carmen had started as a student in my cooking class 6 years earlier. Now she managed a staff of 25 and was saving money to open her own location. "You changed my life," she told me recently. "You showed me I could be more than I thought possible." These success stories weren't about revenge or proving David wrong. They were about discovering what happened when women stopped making themselves small and started believing in their own capabilities. David's betrayal had been the catalyst, but the real power had always been within me. 10 years after that devastating text message, I received an unexpected call from Amber. the 21-year-old who'd unknowingly helped destroy my marriage. She was now 31, married to someone her own age, and running a successful marketing company. "I wanted to thank you," she said, her voice mature and thoughtful, "for not hating me, for showing grace when you had every right to be angry. Watching how you handled everything taught me what real strength looks like." After a pause, she added, "David actually did us both a favor by showing his true character so clearly." Her call reminded me that healing creates space for wisdom. The woman who'd been devastated by David's cruelty had evolved into someone who could extend compassion even to those who'd hurt her. That transformation was worth more than any revenge. Today, as I prepare for the opening of my 12th restaurant location, I sometimes think about that text message that changed everything. "Done with this joke of a marriage, Elena. Amber and I are heading to Miami. She's everything you'll never be. Oh, and I cleaned out our account this morning." Those words were meant to devastate me, to leave me broken and begging. Instead, they became the foundation of everything I built afterward. David thought he was writing the ending to our story. In reality, he was just clearing the way for my real life to begin. My response had been simple. "I understand. Take care." 2 sentences that contained all the grace and strength he'd never recognized in me. By the time he realized what I'd accomplished, it was indeed too late, not for reconciliation, but for him to claim any credit for the woman I'd become. The young women who work in my restaurants today see me as a success story. But I know the truth. I'm not successful because I survived David's betrayal. I'm successful because I finally stopped hiding my light to make someone else comfortable. David's cruel text message had been intended to diminish me, to reduce me to nothing so he could feel better about his choices. Instead, it became the moment I discovered my own worth. His attempt to destroy me had actually set me free. Sometimes the cruelest betrayals become our greatest gifts, not because they don't hurt, but because they force us to discover who we really are. And if you're going through something similar right now, remember this. Their betrayal says everything about them and nothing about your worth. Your story isn't over, it's just beginning. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories of resilience and transformation.